My son used my pension to pay for his wedding. Every month, the money I earned from 40 years of aching hands and sleepless nights went straight into his account. He said it was temporary. He said family helps family. On the day he married her, they cut a 5-tier cake under crystal lights, while I sat at home, eating dry bread, calculating how many days I could survive before the electricity was shut off. I did not cry. I did not complain. But something broke quietly inside me that day, and when a woman stops begging and starts thinking, everything changes. I had always believed sacrifice was love. That was the lie I built my life on. I am 68 years old. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I worked as a school librarian for most of my adult life. Not a glamorous job, not one that earns applause, but it paid the bills, and it allowed me to raise my son alone after his father died when Matthew was 9. Every shelf I dusted, every book I repaired with tape and patience, I did with the same thought in my mind. This is for him, this is for his future. Matthew grew up gentle on the surface, polite words, easy smile. But beneath that softness lived an entitlement I refused to see. When he wanted new shoes, I skipped meals. When he needed tuition help, I sold my wedding ring. When he graduated college, I cried harder than he did because I thought it meant my sacrifices had worked. The first time he asked for my pension money, he was 34. "Just for a few months, Mom," he said, sitting at my kitchen table, scrolling through his phone while I poured tea. "Wedding expenses are insane. I'll pay you back once things settle." Wedding. The word landed heavily in the room. He was marrying Claire, a woman with manicured hands and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She called me Eleanor instead of Mom, even after the engagement. She hugged me like one hugs an acquaintance at a funeral. I hesitated. My pension was not large, it was survival money. Rent, medication, groceries. "How much do you need?" I asked. "All of it," he replied without looking up. "Just temporarily." Something in my chest tightened. "Matthew, that's everything I live on." He sighed, not in anger, in irritation, as if I were being unreasonable. "You don't really spend much anyway. You're good at managing. You always have been." There it was. The compliment disguised as a weapon, I nodded, because I always did. The transfers began the next month, and the month after that, and the month after that. Claire's wedding dress cost more than my annual rent. The venue had chandeliers imported from Italy. There was a live string quartet, an open bar, a dessert table longer than my living room. I was given a seat in the back row. On the wedding day, I wore the same navy dress I had worn to 3 funerals. I brought a gift I could barely afford, a check I knew would disappear into the void of their shared account. When Matthew danced with Claire, laughter spilling from his mouth, I realized something with startling clarity. He had not married her with his money. He had married her with mine. After the wedding, the calls slowed. The excuses increased. "Next month, Mom. Things are tight right now." "You understand, right?" I understood too well. By winter, I was choosing between heat and food. I wore 2 sweaters indoors. I cut my pills in half. I stopped buying fresh fruit because it was a luxury. Matthew posted photos from their honeymoon in Greece. Claire tagged the location. Santorini, white buildings, blue seas. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. One evening, as I sat in the dark to save electricity, I looked around my apartment and felt something unfamiliar. Anger, not loud, not explosive, sharp, focused. Awake, I had spent my life preserving things. Furniture covered in plastic. China locked away. Jewelry saved for special occasions that never came. My life had become a waiting room, and I realized something that terrified me more than hunger. If I did nothing, I would die quietly and they would inherit everything. That night, I opened the old wooden cabinet in my bedroom. Inside were documents I hadn't touched in years, deeds, certificates, papers Matthew had never asked about because he assumed there was nothing left. He was wrong, very wrong. And for the first time in decades, I made a decision that did not include my son. I chose myself. I did not sleep that night, not because of fear, because my mind was finally awake. At dawn, I made tea and sat at the small kitchen table where I had once helped Matthew with his homework. The same table where I had signed over my pension access without reading the fine print, trusting my own child more than any stranger. I spread the papers out slowly. Deeds. A small investment account my late husband had opened without ever mentioning it. A life insurance policy I had forgotten existed because it felt wrong to think about money tied to death. None of it made me rich, but together it meant something powerful. Options. The first call I made was not to Matthew, it was to the bank. The woman on the phone spoke gently, professionally. She explained what could be frozen, what could be redirected, what required my physical presence. I put on my coat. The good one, the one I had saved for important days. This was one. Inside the bank, I felt invisible at first, an older woman with tired eyes. Then I placed the documents on the desk, one by one. The manager's expression changed. Respect has a sound. It is the moment someone stops rushing you. Within 48 hours, my pension deposits were redirected back to my account. Legally. Quietly. Permanently. Matthew noticed 3 days later. He called in the evening, irritation barely masked by concern. "Mom, did something happen with the bank? The money didn't come through," I breathed slowly. "I needed it." A pause, a sharp one. "What do you mean you needed it? That money is already allocated." Allocated, as if it had never been mine. "I'm cold," I said simply. "And hungry." He laughed softly as if indulging a child. "Come on, don't be dramatic. I'll send you something later." Later. I ended the call before he could finish the sentence. That night, for the first time in months, I turned the heat up, just a little. I slept without my coat. The next step was harder. I contacted a realtor, not to buy, to ask questions. The apartment I lived in was rent-controlled, but the building had appreciated significantly. I had an option I never explored because it felt dangerous. Like admitting I might need a different life. The realtor was younger than my son. She spoke quickly. Efficiently, she did not pity me. When she gave me the estimate, my hands trembled. It was enough to start over, enough to stop surviving. Word travels fast when entitlement is threatened. Claire called next. Her voice was sweet, tight around the edges. "Eleanor, Matthew is really stressed. You should have talked to us before making changes." Us, I pictured her wedding ring, the diamond that caught the light like it deserved it. "I made no changes that weren't mine to make," I replied. Silence. Then sharper, "You don't understand how marriage works. We have shared expenses." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "And I have shared my body with hunger. We all make adjustments." She hung up. Days passed. I began sorting through my belongings, not with sadness, with clarity. I donated furniture I had been guarding like a dragon hoards gold. I sold jewelry I had never worn. Each transaction felt like shedding a layer of obligation I had mistaken for love. Matthew showed up unannounced one afternoon. He looked tired, annoyed, wrong-footed. "You're overreacting," he said, standing in my doorway like he owned it. "We're family." I met his eyes calmly. "Families don't starve each other," he scoffed. "You always do this. You martyr yourself, then act shocked when no one thanks you." The words hit, because they were true, but not in the way he thought. "I am done being a martyr," I said. "I am learning to be a person." He stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. A week later, I signed the papers. I did not tell Matthew. I did not ask permission. The apartment sold quickly. On moving day, I packed only what I needed: clothes, books, photographs. I left the rest behind like a skin I no longer required. I moved into a smaller place across town. Sunlight flooded the windows in the morning. There was a park nearby, a grocery store where I did not count coins in my palm. I bought fresh bread. I bought flowers I ate without guilt. Matthew found out 2 weeks later. His message was not concern, it was panic. You sold the apartment without telling me. I stared at the phone for a long time before replying. Yes. You had no right, I typed slowly. I had every right, you just forgot. He called. I did not answer. For the first time in my life, I let silence do the work. I did not feel victorious. I felt steady. And that was new. Matthew did not stay silent for long. Entitled people rarely do. He showed up at my new apartment on a Sunday afternoon, carrying anger the way he once carried his school bag carelessly, assuming someone else would shoulder the weight. Claire stood a step behind him, arms crossed, lips tight, already offended by a space that did not include her control. They had found the address through paperwork. Of course they had. I opened the door slowly. Matthew looked around, confusion flashing across his face. The apartment was modest but bright. Clean lines, plants near the window, a quiet dignity he did not recognize because it had never existed in his presence before. So this is where you ran off to, he said. I didn't run, I replied. I moved. Claire stepped inside without invitation. Her eyes scanned the room, measuring, judging. You sold the apartment, she said flatly. That was supposed to be Matthew's someday. I closed the door behind them, gently, with intention. It was never yours, I said, and it was never his. It was mine. Matthew exhaled sharply. You're being selfish. The word hung in the air, selfish. After 40 years of sacrifice, the accusation sounded almost theatrical. I gave you my pension, I said quietly. I gave you my warmth, my food, my security. I paid for your wedding while I skipped meals. He looked away. I didn't ask you to do that, he muttered. No, I agreed. You assumed I would. Claire stepped forward. You're exaggerating. We thought you were managing. I met her eyes. For the first time, truly looked at her. You thought wrong, I said, and you never asked. Silence. Matthew rubbed his temples. This is ridiculous. You could have talked to us. We could have worked something out. I nodded. I tried. You told me to boil water into my food to feel full. Claire flinched, just slightly. Matthew's voice softened. You're my mother. And I am a person, I said, not a resource. The room felt smaller, not because of tension. Because the truth takes up space when it's finally spoken. What do you want? He asked. The old version of me would have said an apology, a promise, a return to the familiar misery of being needed but not valued, but I was not that woman anymore. I want nothing from you, I said. That is the point, Claire's voice sharpened. So that's it, you're cutting us off. I am setting boundaries, I replied. If you want a relationship with me, it will be built on respect. If not, you will live without my support, financial or emotional. Matthew stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. After everything I did, he said, I corrected him gently. After everything I did. They left without saying goodbye. That night I slept peacefully. Weeks passed, the silence stretched, then shifted. Matthew sent a message, short, careful. I didn't realize how bad it was. I'm sorry. I read it twice. I did not rush to forgive. Forgiveness is not a reflex. It is a process. I replied when I was ready. I accept your apology, but things will not go back to how they were. He did not argue. Claire never apologized. And strangely, I was fine with that. I filled my days slowly, deliberately. I volunteered at a community center. I joined a walking group. I cooked meals that nourished me instead of stretching thin. I spent money on comfort without shame. Shoes that didn't hurt my feet. A coat that actually kept me warm. I stopped waiting to be grateful for. One afternoon, I ran into Matthew at a cafe. Alone, he looked older, tired in a way ambition cannot fix. We spoke politely, carefully. When he left, he hugged me, brief, awkward, real. I hope you're happy, he said. I smiled. I am, I replied, and that's enough. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. The city hummed below, alive, unapologetic. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who believed love meant depletion. I wish I could tell her this. You are not cruel for choosing yourself. You are not selfish for surviving. You do not owe your life to anyone who treats it as expendable. I paid for my son's wedding with my pension, but I bought back my life with courage, and it was worth every penny.